You want to own a casino. Come on, admit it. High rollers in tailored suits, champagne on ice, a floor that never sleeps, chips clicking under gold light while you watch it all from a private balcony, untouchable, printing money on autopilot. The house always wins. Build it, flip the switch, let the math do the rest, forever. Wrong. Almost none of that is how this business actually works. The house does win, but you are not the house the way you think you are. And the gap between casino owner and casino operator drowning in debt service is thinner than any slot machine will ever admit. This might be the most expensive illusion in American business. And by the end of this, you'll understand not just why it's an illusion, but where the real entry points actually are, if you know where to look. Start with the scale, because the top-line numbers are genuinely staggering. The U.S. commercial casino industry pulls in somewhere around $60 to $70 billion a year in gross gaming revenue. Nevada alone accounts for over $13 billion of that. More than 900 commercial and tribal casinos are running across the country right now, and that number has only grown as more states legalize commercial gaming to chase tax revenue. Now, the undercut. Net operating margins for most commercial casino properties sit between 8 and 15%. For smaller regional properties, after debt service, that number can fall to 3 to 6%. Not 40, not even 20, most years. The industry is enormous. Your slice of it, especially early on, is not. This is the gap between what the headline revenue number suggests and what actually lands in an owner's pocket. And it's the first thing every casino financier learns to stop confusing. Here's the part nobody tells you before you sign anything. A casino isn't one business. It's 3 or 4 different businesses wearing the same neon sign. There's the Vegas Strip Mega Resort. Gaming might be just 30 to 40% of total revenue, propped up by hotel rooms, restaurants, retail, shows. It's the model everyone pictures, but it's actually the hardest one to replicate because it depends on a tourism density that exists in maybe 3 or 4 markets in the entire country. There's the regional commercial casino, a riverboat, a standalone property in a smaller market, where gaming is 70 to 90% of revenue and everything lives or dies on slot volume. This is the model most new licenses actually fall into. There's the tribal casino, running under its own regulatory and tax structure, often fatter margins, but capped by compact terms on where and how big it can grow, and generally closed to outside ownership entirely. And there's the small format card room or racino bolted onto an existing track, cheap to enter, but with a revenue ceiling that never really lifts, because the license itself restricts what games and how many machines you're allowed to run. Same word. 4 completely different financial animals, 4 completely different risk profiles, 4 completely different paths to break even. So what does it actually cost to open the doors? This is where the fantasy usually dies quietly in a spreadsheet. Gaming licenses alone can run anywhere from $100,000 in smaller states to over $10 million in Nevada or New Jersey, before you've built a single wall. Land and construction for a mid-sized regional property. $150 to $400 million for anything that isn't a glorified slot barn. A true strip-scale resort runs into the billions. Resorts World Las Vegas cost north of $4 billion to build. Slot machines alone run $15,000 to $25,000 apiece, and a mid-sized floor needs 1,000 to 2,000 of them, meaning the slot floor alone can represent a $20 to $40 million line item before a single guest walks in. Add table games, surveillance systems that need to cover every square foot of the floor around the clock, cash cage infrastructure, compliance software, regulatory bonding, background investigations on every key employee, and the working capital reserves states force you to hold before you're even licensed to operate. Total cost to enter as a genuine mid-tier operator. Realistically, $200 to $600 million. This is not a business you start with a loan from your uncle. It's not really a business you start at all in the traditional founder sense. It's a business you get invited into once you already control that kind of capital. So where does the money actually come from once the doors are open? Not from where you think. Table games, blackjack, craps, roulette, poker, feel like the soul of the casino. It's the image every movie sells you. It's actually the weakest revenue layer in the building. Table games make up just 20 to 30% of gaming revenue, and the house edge is razor thin, 1 to 2% on blackjack with good rules, maybe 5% on roulette. Not 7, not 15. Table games exist mostly for atmosphere, theater, and high roller retention. The pit boss recognizing a whale by name is worth more in loyalty than the table itself earns in hold. The real engine is slots. Slot machines generate 65 to 75% of gaming revenue at most commercial casinos, and the mechanism is beautifully simple and brutally efficient. A slot machine's theoretical hold percentage, the built-in house edge, typically runs 5 to 12% depending on the machine and jurisdiction. But because of volume and speed of play, a single machine can process hundreds of spins an hour from a single player. Run the math on a machine averaging $500 wagered per hour at an 8% hold times 1,000 machines times 16 operating hours a day. That's not a rounding error. That's the entire building's payroll before lunch generated quietly, one 25-cent spin at a time, by people who genuinely believe they're having fun because they are. Then there's the layer most people never think to look for: non-gaming revenue. On the strip-scale resort model, hotel rooms, food and beverage, nightlife, and retail can make up 50 to 60% of total property revenue. Here's the trap in that number, though. Those verticals often run at a loss or break-even on their own, priced deliberately low, because their entire job is to keep bodies on property and near the machines longer. The steakhouse isn't a profit center. It's a retention tool wearing a profit center's clothing. The nightclub isn't there to make money on cover charges. It's there so the 26-year-old who just lost $400 at the blackjack table has a reason to stay on property until 2 a.m. instead of walking 2 blocks to spend that same energy somewhere else. And then the deepest layer, the one that actually separates the winners from the properties that quietly bleed out: player rewards, data, and comp management. Modern casinos run loyalty programs that track individual player theoretical loss, what a guest is mathematically expected to lose based on bet size, game, and time played, and comp back a carefully calculated fraction of it in free rooms, meals, and credit, specifically to keep the highest value players in the building instead of at a competitor 2 exits down the highway. This is the layer that turns a mediocre floor into a great one, and almost nobody outside the industry thinks about it as revenue infrastructure. It's not marketing, it's yield management wearing a marketing costume, and the casinos that do it best can predict a player's lifetime value to the dollar before that player has any idea they're being modeled. Which brings us to the trick almost nobody outside the industry has ever heard of: hold percentage manipulation through denomination mix. It's not illegal. It's just invisible. Casinos quietly shift the ratio of penny slots to dollar slots to high-limit machines on the floor based on real-time data about local demographics and time of year, because lower denomination machines can be configured with a higher theoretical hold percentage while still feeling generous to the player. The per-spin cost feels tiny, even as the house edge on that machine is actually higher. A casino can raise its effective floor-wide hold by a full percentage point or more just by reweighting machine denominations seasonally. No new equipment, no new marketing, just quietly rearranging the deck chairs based on who's walking through the door that month. It's one of the highest leverage, lowest cost moves in the entire operation, and it's happening on floors across the country right now without a single guest noticing. Now for the daily bleed. The unglamorous grind that erodes all of this. Labor is the single biggest line item, often 25 to 35% of total operating costs, because a 24-hour casino floor needs dealers, security, surveillance, cage staff, and compliance officers around the clock. Every single day of the year, holidays included. Utilities for a property that never turns its lights off. Climate control, that endless carpet of humming slot machines. Industrial kitchens running 3 shifts routinely run into the millions annually. Then there's the financing carry. Most casino construction is heavily leveraged, and debt service on a $300 million build at commercial rates can eat $15 to $20 million a year before a single chip hits the table. Regulatory compliance software, anti-money laundering monitoring, responsible gaming programs, and constant licensing renewals add a steady drip nobody budgets for correctly the first time. Every single day this building is open. It's costing you tens of thousands of dollars just to exist, whether anyone walks through the door or not. Time isn't neutral here. Time is the enemy with the meter always running. Here's the structural risk, the one domino that can take the whole thing down: regulatory and license concentration. Your entire business exists at the pleasure of a state gaming commission, and unlike almost any other industry, your license can be suspended, restricted, or revoked based on compliance failures that have nothing to do with your financial performance. A single serious anti-money laundering violation, a compact dispute if you're tribal adjacent, or a change in state tax policy on gross gaming revenue can rewrite your entire margin structure overnight, with no negotiation and very little recourse. You don't own a business in the traditional sense. You own a conditional privilege that a regulator can narrow at will. And your entire capital structure is built assuming that privilege stays exactly as generous as it was the day you signed the loan documents. Let's talk about a real one. Revel Casino Hotel opened in Atlantic City in April 2012, a $2.4 billion resort, one of the most expensive casino builds ever attempted outside Las Vegas, pitched as the property that would single-handedly revive Atlantic City's fading gaming market. It had 47 stories, ocean views, and a design built to attract a younger, non-gaming crowd through nightlife and entertainment, rather than the traditional slots and buffet demographic. It never worked. Revel filed for bankruptcy just 16 months after opening in 2013, restructured, and filed for bankruptcy again in 2014, ultimately closing that September, barely 2.5 years after its grand opening. The core failure wasn't a lack of visitors walking through the door. It was a capital structure that assumed strip-level non-gaming revenue in a regional market that simply didn't have Vegas-level disposable income density, combined with debt service that required near-flawless performance from day one with zero room for a slow ramp-up. The building was eventually sold for around $200 million, less than a tenth of what it cost to build, and reopened years later under different ownership and a different brand. Revel is the case study every casino financier now studies specifically as a cautionary tale. Spectacular architecture and genuine foot traffic are not the same thing as a capital structure that can survive year one. So if the $200 to $600 million entry ticket rules out almost everyone watching this, where's the actual opportunity? Because there is one. It's just not where the neon sign is. The fastest growing piece of this entire industry isn't physical at all. It's the digital layer wrapped around it. Online and mobile sports betting and iGaming platforms now operate in over 30 states, and unlike a brick-and-mortar casino, the capital barrier to build the technology behind one of these platforms is a fraction of what it costs to pour concrete. A licensed online operator can launch a state-specific platform for a few $1,000,000 in licensing, compliance, and technology, not hundreds of millions in construction. That's still not startup with a laptop territory, but it's an entirely different order of magnitude, and the margins on digital gaming, without the labor cost of a 24-hour physical floor, can run meaningfully higher than a regional casino's. Below that tier sits social casino apps, free-to-play slot and card games that monetize through in-app purchases of virtual chips instead of real money wagering, which sidesteps most gaming licensing requirements entirely and has produced genuine venture-backed success stories with founding teams far smaller than any casino's executive staff. And below that, the true low capital entry point, B2B. Casinos are enormous, slow-moving enterprises that desperately need modern software, player tracking and comp management platforms, anti-money laundering compliance tools, surveillance analytics, loyalty program infrastructure. A founder who builds one sharp piece of that stack and sells it into casino operators as a subscription never has to hold a gaming license, never has to touch a slot machine, and never has to raise 9 figures. They're selling picks and shovels into an industry where every single operator is legally required to keep buying them. This is the version of getting into the casino business that actually resembles a normal startup. And it's the version almost nobody pictures when they say the word casino. So how do the smart, well-capitalized players in the physical world actually beat this math? Mostly, they don't play the same game at all. The major public gaming companies, the Caesars and MGM-scale operators, increasingly separate the real estate from the operations entirely, spinning casino properties into gaming-focused REITs that collect fixed rent from an operating company, insulating the landlord entity from gaming revenue volatility while the operating company takes on the risk. Multi-property groups diversify geographically so a downturn in one regional market doesn't sink the whole portfolio. And some of the largest players in the space aren't even primarily chasing operating profit. For certain ownership groups, particularly around large-scale integrated resorts, the casino functions partly as an anchor asset that drives real estate appreciation and ancillary development value around it. Meaning the gaming floor's job isn't purely to maximize its own margin, it's to keep the whole surrounding ecosystem full. Now, the volatility, in real numbers. In a good year, a well-run mid-sized regional casino might pull in $180 million in gross gaming revenue, run at a 12% net margin after all operating costs, but before extraordinary items, netting around $21.6 million. Enough to comfortably service debt, fund reinvestment in the property, and return real profit to ownership. In a bad year, a new competitor opens 40 minutes down the highway, a regional recession trims discretionary spending, or a regulatory tax hike shaves 2 points off your hold. That same property might see gross gaming revenue drop to $140 million, while fixed costs barely move, compressing net margin down to 3 to 4%, roughly $5 million, which in a heavily leveraged property can be barely enough to cover debt service, let alone generate a real return. The swing between those 2 years isn't a rounding error. It's the difference between a thriving asset and a covenant breach letter from your lender. So, is it worth it? Depends entirely on which version of casino owner you're actually becoming. If you're stepping into this as a well-capitalized operator inside an existing multi-property group with access to institutional debt, REIT-style real estate separation, and enough scale to absorb a bad regional year without flinching, this can be one of the most durable, cash-generative businesses in existence, precisely because the math of the house edge never actually goes away. If you're an independent operator, building a single standalone property, heavily leveraged, betting the entire structure on hitting strip-level non-gaming revenue in a market that was never built to support it, you are one regional recession or one aggressive new competitor away from becoming the next case study in somebody else's script. And if you're neither of those, if you're someone with ambition but not 9 figures of capital, the real move was never the neon sign at all. It's the software running quietly behind it, or the app on the phone in every gambler's pocket, where the barrier to entry is measured in months and a few $100,000, not decades and $500 million. This business, in its physical form, rewards patience, scale, and boring conservative leverage. It quietly destroys ambition, spectacle, and anyone who mistakes a beautiful building for a sound balance sheet. A casino was never really the product. It was a very expensive machine for converting patience into cash flow. And almost nobody who builds one has enough of it. The ones who actually win early are rarely the ones who own the floor. They're the ones who figured out how to sell to everyone who does.